The next item of business is Members' Business debate on motion 20382 in the name of Beatrice Wishart on the proposed centralisation of air traffic control in the Highlands and Islands. And this debate will be concluded without any questions being put. Would those members who wish to speak in the debate please press the request to speak buttons now. And I call on Beatrice Wishart to open the debate for around 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I'd like to begin by thanking members for supporting my motion and for being present in the chamber this afternoon. I'd also like to welcome the members of staff from Highl who are sitting in the gallery today. I'm bringing forward this debate on air traffic control centralisation because it's an issue of huge concern to my constituents in Shetland and indeed to communities across the Highlands and Islands that have links to airports run by Highl, which I remind the Chamber is 100% owned by the Scottish Government. As part of its Air Traffic Management Strategy 2030, Highl is pushing ahead with the introduction of remote towers at 7 of its airports, effectively centralising air traffic control to Inverness. According to Highl, 86 jobs will be impacted. That's the same scale in our communities as it would be if hundreds of jobs were lost in Edinburgh or Glasgow. Stakeholders like Shetland Islands Council, when I was a member, were told that change was necessary because of the difficulty of recruitment and retention of air traffic controllers, that the method of air traffic control currently used in the Highl network is out of date and out of step with the rest of the world, and Highl had to future-proof its operation to ensure continuity of service. Before I go any further, I do want to be clear that the people I have spoken to are not against change. It should go without saying that everyone wants a safe, resilient service in the Highlands and Islands. The main issues that have been raised by those who disagree with Highl's proposals are genuine concerns, though, about just that, safety and resilience on the lifeline services that operate out of Highl airports, along with the loss of highly skilled jobs in our communities. I will first say something about the safety and reliability of remote towers. A Swedish air traffic management executive contacted me last week to tell me that the airports his company serves have not introduced remote towers because the technology is, and I quote, not mature yet. My predecessor, Tavish Scott, highlighted last February that there were 79 incidents of full or partial degradation of communications of air traffic control between 2013 and October 2018. Many of those faults involved Inverness Airport. There is no suggestion that passengers were put at risk, but it does raise serious questions about the technological viability of the plan. Related to that point is the changeability of the weather in the Highlands and Islands, which can often be extreme. There's no substitution for eyes on the ground. So the remote towers plan does not fill me with confidence. Moving to recruitment, I appreciate that there have been some challenges in recent years, though not at Sombra. There is a shortage of air traffic controllers across the UK. It's a respected profession that requires a great deal of training, and there's only one trainer in the UK for the existing model of air traffic management on the Highl network. Highl's view is that it's easier to attract controllers to Inverness than to the islands, but the air traffic controllers I've spoken to do not want to move to Inverness. They have settled and made their homes in the islands and wish to stay in our island communities. In any business or organisation, the most valuable asset is the staff. In implementing major change, particularly one that involves transformation on the scale being proposed by Highl, one of the first principles is to involve your staff. Bring them along with you rather than force change on them. A survey conducted by Prospect of its members working for Highl tells us that 94% oppose the remote towers plan, and 82% would be more likely to seek to leave Highl if that was implemented. Highl is setting itself for a real recruitment crisis, not for solving one. And that brings me on to the lack of consultation. 2 years ago, Highl's own consultants described remote towers as one of the most expensive and certainly the most difficult and risky options. The remote towers are predicted to cost £123 million over 15 years, a figure which is almost certain to rise. Yet Parliament was told only on Tuesday, in response to a question from Liam MacArthur, that Highl will be conducting an island's impact assessment into the project. Deputy Presiding Officer, that is too little too late. People in Shetland already rightly feel the decision has already been made. Highl will, of course, say that they've done a thorough consultation with all stakeholders. The air traffic controllers who have contacted me have been clear that discussions with Highl have only been one way and only after the board had already made its decision to proceed. Centralisation has never been in doubt, and like on so many other occasions, a centralised service is never based in the islands. Deputy Presiding Officer, to conclude, the timing of Highl's decision could not be starker. On 27th December, the first National Islands Plan was published. The plan is a requirement of the Islands Act. The first strategic objective in the plan is addressing population decline. We are rightly told, and I quote, ensuring that legislation and policy affords a supporting environment to encourage economically active people either to stay, return or move to an island is of the utmost importance. Hyll's decision to rip highly skilled jobs out of our island communities therefore beggars belief. I agree entirely with the leader of Western Isles Council, Roddy Mackay, who said last Friday, "This is not an attitude or approach we would expect from a Scottish Government-owned company." Deputy Presiding Officer, I ask the Minister to halt this centralising project. This issue is surely a test of whether the Islands Act is to live up to the promises and expectations of islanders. More than that, the delivery of our lifeline air service and highly skilled jobs are being put at risk. Thank you.
We now move to the open debate. Speeches of around 4 minutes, please, from Gail Ross, followed by Jamie Halcrow-Johnson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I would like to begin by thanking my colleague Beatrice Wishart for bringing this important and timely debate to the Chamber today. Like all of my Highlands and Islands colleagues, I was also concerned when I heard of Highl's plans to centralise air traffic control operations in Inverness. And no matter what your opinion is on the decision, we do agree that it will fundamentally change and modernise the way air traffic services are provided at our rural Scottish airports. But the decision will bring considerable disruption to affected staff. And I feared that compulsory redundancies would be necessary, which I, along with the Scottish Government, are firmly against. So I've been in contact with several stakeholders over the last week, including Highl, Prospect and Loganair. And while Loganair have broadly welcomed the changes, Prospect have nearly unanimously opposed the decision. But what is clear from my correspondence with both Highl and Prospect is that both parties are committed to the modernisation of our airports and their systems, and we all acknowledge that change is necessary. But Prospect do not feel that they were consulted thoroughly or even at all before making this decision. David Avery of Prospect has gone on record saying, quote, "It is inconceivable that such far-reaching changes can be brought in with the paltry level of consultation and transparency we have seen," unquote. Now, my main concern does lie with the current workforce across the affected airports, although I would like to hear from the Cabinet Secretary about the safety issues that Beatrice Wishart brought up in her opening speech. And although we've been told that those who want to commute to Inverness will be free to do so, it is impossible to imagine that staff who are located on our islands would commit to making this journey. And for those who live outside the commuting zone, they now face a relocation being forced upon them. And from my correspondence with Highl, there seems to be a lack of clarity on how subsidised travel would be provided to the commuters, as well as an acknowledgement that there are no provisions in place for staff accommodation facilities in Inverness. The centralisation process has raised valid concerns of whether this decision is in direct contravention of the Islands Act that came into force last summer. Highl have acknowledged that they will review their approach dependent on the outcome of an island impact assessment that they have committed to undertake, and I welcome this, although I feel, along with other colleagues in the islands, that it definitely should have been conducted prior to publishing any proposed plans. But, Presiding Officer, I have to acknowledge that the plans include investment in areas outside Inverness. New radar surveillance equipment will be introduced at my local airport in Wick, and those working with the new equipment must do so on site. And therefore, there is a degree of flexibility in place for those who do not want to relocate to Inverness, and similar changes will also take place at Benbecula. And whilst I truly understand the apprehension that Prospect and their members are displaying, I do know that Highl and the Scottish Government have a track record of working hard to keep connectivity and infrastructure in place in my constituency. And can I remind the Chamber of the determination by both parties to sustain the air services to and from Wick John O'Groats over the winter period. And on top of this, there has been a lot of good work done by Highl, Caithness Chamber of Commerce and others locally regarding our PSO business case. So whilst I can and do credit Highl in their efforts to preserve connectivity to the far north, I urge them to continue their hard work to engage with key stakeholders and to recognise if plans need to be amended as this current project progresses. In conclusion, Presiding Officer, I have listened to what various stakeholders have had to say on the issue, and I now urge Highl to listen and to provide reassurance to the affected workers and relevant unions, as well as scrutinising their decision via a comprehensive island impact assessment. Thank you.
Jamie Halcrow-Johnson, followed by Rhoda Grant.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer, and can I thank Beatrice Wishart for bringing forward this important debate to the Chamber, for her contribution, and also for Gail Ross's, I thought, very thoughtful contribution too. I think it's important that the voice of service users are very much at the front of this. Plans by Highl to centralise air traffic control services are just the latest in a long line of issues where the company, which is obviously owned by the Scottish Government, finds itself on the wrong side of public opinion locally. Another situation where the feeling amongst many in the remote and island communities that Highl serves is that the decision has been taken in the interests of the company and saving money. Since Highl announced its proposals, it will come as no surprise that constituents across my region have been concerned. And I'm sure that many of the other members who are speaking today have experienced exactly the same. And as Beatrice Wishart touched upon, people recognise the need for modernisation and for sustainability to serve a region that can be, as those of us that live there know, a challenging place to operate. But they're worried that this is coming at the expense of their communities. It has been less than a year since the Historic Islands Act was passed by this Parliament, and passed with widespread support from all the parties. It enshrines the principle that our islands have clear, distinct issues that should be considered in policy making. I welcome the news that at the very least an island's impact assessment will be carried out into Highl's changes, but I'm concerned that, as others are, Highl's proposals are at odds with the objectives of the Islands Act. The Scottish Government's own islands plan highlights the importance of local jobs, stating, "It is clear that all islands could benefit from more opportunities for the people who live there. Sometimes a small increase in jobs or income generating opportunities can have a huge impact on an island community." In this instance, I agree with the Scottish Government. Yet Highl's proposals will uproot direct employment from those very same island communities, impacting on families, businesses and the local communities. Will the member take an intervention? Yes, of course.
Bill Bowman.
Thank you for taking that. Will the member agree with me that although the name is Highlands and Islands, Dundee is also included in this group, and the members there could also be affected?
Jamie Halcrow-Johnson.
I'm happy to. I think that's an important point to make, and I thank my colleague for making that. The Islands Plan also states, and I quote, "Transport is a key sector where island communities want to have an even greater voice so that they can genuinely inform decisions that will affect them day in, day out." Is the Cabinet Secretary confident the objective is being met in this case? Time and time again, constituents have criticised Highl's ability to consult adequately, whether with local communities or with their own staff. Is the Minister confident that local communities, those directly impacted by these plans, have been adequately consulted and their voices heard? And what about the regional air traffic controllers themselves? They're highly skilled, and the Helios report, which was commissioned by Highl, presents the clearest possible indication that ATC staff have deep concerns about job security and do not consider relocation as a viable alternative. The same Helios report noted that the potential dangers of the connection between the remote towers and airport facilities is not 100%. It also outlined the potentially prohibitive costs entailed in making sure these electronic links are completely secure. Deputy Presiding Officer, I'm from Orkney. I rely on these vital lifeline links to get here to Parliament and home again, to go out and meet my constituents and to represent them in this Parliament. I've experienced the worst of the weather conditions these links have to operate in. One winter I sat in Aberdeen Airport for almost 10 hours, with another hour or so sitting on the plane itself on the tarmac, waiting for a weather window to allow us to be able to leave Aberdeen and land in Kirkwall safely. I simply cannot believe the proposed centralised system would allow the operation of the flight safely in similar circumstances and conditions. So I would urge the Cabinet Secretary, unless you can guarantee today that those travelling to and from our island communities will see absolutely no detrimental impact on flights, whether they're personal, business or journeys for medical appointments, then you must ask Highl to think again. Because now is the opportunity for ministers to take a different course, to refresh and reset the relationship with Highl, its employees and the community it serves, to fully engage with those communities, to show that Highl and the Scottish Government is genuinely listening to our concerns, that our voice will be heard and that our concerns will not be ridden roughshod over again. Thank you.
Rhoda Grant, followed by John Finney.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I too want to congratulate Beatrice Wishart in bringing forward this really important debate to the Chamber. I've been speaking to air traffic controllers for years now about this proposal, and rather than their fares being allayed, these fears have increased. The overwhelming majority of air traffic controllers currently employed in Highl are against the centralisation plan. New staff are being recruited with a clause in their contract that makes provision for relocation from local airports to Inverness in the future. And that shows that the decision has been made a long time ago without the appropriate consultation with existing staff. Proposals for alternative arrangements to remote towers have been submitted. Those were drawn up by senior staff, existing staff. The proposals for an alternative appear not to have been considered at all. These have staff backing, but there's no indication they have ever seen the light of day within Highl. For remote towers to work, there needs to be reliable digital connectivity, normally 4 separate connections to provide security. Remote tower operations in Scandinavian countries have hardwired cable with backup and generally serve a single aircraft operation in airports that have around 1 or 2 flights a week. The UK has a busier airport, London City, where remote working is being considered, but that's not yet working independently, so therefore is not a live comparative. It's also got multiple hardwire backups to connectivity, and it's got several large airports around about with controlled airspace that would help out with any problems. There's been a suggestion that Highl would require a lower level of resilience, but that's surely putting lives and services at risk. This reality is that in some cases, these airports don't have adequate digital links at all, far less 4 independent ones. And the withdrawal of connected communities in the Western Isles means that that is even worse. Everyone who lives on islands and in remote parts of Scotland knows the problems with poor internet, electricity and communication infrastructure, and indeed they see the impact that weather in these places has on this infrastructure. We heard this week there's going to be an islands impact assessment carried out. Obviously, this is only going to be a paper exercise because the scheme is already being contracted and tendered for. This is the first test of an island impact assessment. It has to be meaningful. We've also heard that Benbecula and Wick are being downgraded now. There is no islands impact assessment of that for Benbecula, and there has been no consultation with staff on these proposals, which come as a bolt out of the blue. And these airports that are being downgraded are the ones that are going to have to deal with the spaceports. It makes absolutely no sense.
Gail Ross.
Thank you. Just quickly to amend the official record, there has been consultation with staff in Wick Airport.
Then my understanding is there wasn't consultation with staff in Benbecula, and I'm willing to have that amended. But surely all staff should be consulted fully before decisions like this are being made. And surely the community should be consulted, given that they are behind spaceports in those areas. They need to make sure that that can be carried out safely. And this will have a huge impact on the economy of both the islands and of Caithness as well, as Gail Ross well knows, because these jobs, albeit that they're poorly paid compared with their counterparts working in other airports throughout Britain, they are more highly paid than the Scottish average, and they're permanent year-round jobs. Not only that, but the families are integral parts of the community, professional staff working for our public services and in private industry, and they will not easily be replaced if they're forced to move as well. Previous recruitment by Highl was an exemplar. They recruited and trained local people vested in their communities who wanted to live there, and now they're being forced to move. Many have contacted me as the scheme has emerged. Families with mortgages that have no choice but to move because there's no alternative employment that could pay that mortgage. Their circumstances gives them no choice at all. And reading their emails is heartbreaking. The personal cost is huge. But there is also a cost to our island and remote communities that's also acceptable. And I urge the government to stop this wrong-headed scheme. The proposal now to develop a multi-million-pound project to put remote towers into only five airports. Surely it would be better and more sensible to put measures in place that control airspace, provide resilience, and do that at a fraction of the cost that this would cost. It's a vanity project, and like the others, it will end in tears. And I beseech the government to put an end to this and look at more sensible options for the future.
John Finney, followed by Liam MacArthur.
Thank you very much indeed, Presiding Officer, and I too congratulate my colleague Beatrice Wishart in bringing this important issue forward. And I don't know anyone who doesn't want the highest standards of safety to apply. So when I receive a briefing from Prospect Union, who have been tremendous supporters, not just to their members, but to the communities that Highlands Islands representatives represent, when they say, and I quote here, by centralising services, Highl are introducing multiple single points of failure to an already complex system. The cameras, the data connections, and at centre itself all present potential points of failure. So I think it's important that we understand how decisions are reached. And I'm also very interested in the management structure and the role that ministers play in this. And I absolutely get, and the many in this chamber would be criticising the Cabinet Secretary if he were to intervene on operational matters. I get that. I absolutely get that. There have been some significant matters that involved Highl over the years, whether that's issues connected with rendition and all the inquiry into that, some significant capital expenditure. The Cabinet Secretary is to be commended in one aspect in relation to Highl, and that was his intervention in respect of pay. That was very important. I would ask that he intervenes again. Many have talked about consultation, or indeed the distinct lack of consultation in regard to this matter. And I have to say that people who are familiar with the fiasco that was the car parking situation, the heavy-handed way that Highl went about that, it's important that every employer has regard to the workforce. The additional responsibility, of course, that's placed in an organisation like Highl is the responsibility to the community. The social responsibility, the unique social responsibility, given their oversight of lifeline services. And I think it's disappointing what we've heard so far. I was really surprised to hear the Cabinet Secretary tell us that Highl are going to do their islands assessment. In one respect, very good, very good. We know that a key objective of the Islands Plan is, and I quote here, to display leadership in the public sector by demonstrating that jobs and careers can be successful on the islands. Well, they fail on that one, most certainly fail on that one. And clearly, as my colleague Rhoda Grant said, in relation to issues like the recent contracts, this is a flawed process. And it's a flawed process because of the way it's been approached. We should celebrate the unique geography of the Highlands and Islands. And that means that issues like productivity, how many flights are overseen by an operator at Gatwick, Edinburgh compared to Beckela, makes no sense whatsoever. It is not a factor that should be brought in. And Highl have got something to be rightly proud about in relation to their employment. And again, it was my colleague Rhoda Grant that made that. I think she referred to them as an exemplar in relation to training up local people. There was a very, very clear and evident example of their social responsibility. and ensuring that quality jobs were provided in the communities where the profile of jobs and the range of jobs, there are not many, too many high-paid jobs. Now, I'll not go into the technical aspects of this, not least because I'm not a very technical person, but to know that one aspect that's referred to even in the technical aspect is the question of local knowledge. And that is unique. We hear examples of some of the particular challenges of delivering air services in the conditions that often prevail across the Highlands and Islands. Recruitment is an issue. It's not an issue that's unique to Highl. It's not an issue that's unique to Scotland, the UK, Europe. It's a worldwide issue that we're aware of. And some of the factors here are going to be compounded. Some of the challenges of retaining staff are going to be compounded if they're, because they're a highly, as has been said, a very coarse term, but highly marketable commodity. People are in demand. They're in demand worldwide. But what we absolutely need is to ensure that there's jobs retained in Islands communities. So if the outcome of any process is the removal of valuable jobs, then the process is wrong. And I would ask the Cabinet Secretary to intervene to ensure that the organisation that has oversight of our Lifeline Air Services acts with social responsibility and not like some multinational corporation. Thank you very much.
The last of the open debate contributions is from Liam MacArthur.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. Like others, can I start by thanking my friend and colleague Beatrice Wishart for securing this important debate. Thank her too for the clarity with which she set out the serious implications of this proposed centralisation for the Shetland community that she represents, as well as the very grave concerns that air traffic control staff, some of whom are in the gallery this afternoon, have been spelling out for months about Highl's plans. Frankly, it's a picture I recognise all too well from an Orkney perspective, as it clearly is to colleagues who represent other communities around the Highlands and Islands from their excellent contributions to this debate. But like Gail Ross, I want to debunk one myth that has grown up around this issue. Those of us voicing concerns about the centralisation of ATC services have been equally passionate in arguing for the modernisation of those services and the infrastructure upon which it relies. It is not an either-or, as some have sought to portray. Controlled airspace is non-negotiable. Full radar surveillance is a must. The fact is, though, centralisation, a remote tower in Inverness covering the entire region, is not the only show in town. Hyll's own consultants recognise this. Indeed, Helios went even further, concluding that the remote tower model was the most costly and risky of the options available to Highl. Yet Highl had been determined to press ahead with this plan from the get-go. All the talk of consultation counts for little when the outcome is predetermined, a point not lost on staff who remain deeply unhappy at the way in which they have been treated throughout this process. To the extent that 82% say they are prepared to leave the organisation if it continues down this route. That figure alone should give Highl pause for thought. It certainly calls into question their ability to deliver this radical change. But it also raises doubts about Highl's ongoing ability to support existing services. The Cabinet Secretary quoted Loganair's Managing Director, Jonathan Hinkle's, at Topical Questions on Tuesday, but failed to acknowledge what Mr Hinkle's then went on to say. So let me remind the Chamber. Mr Hinkle said, quote, "People clearly have a choice between redundancy, relocation, or taking their skills elsewhere in a competitive labour market. This will be an undoubted challenge to manage." From my discussions with local ATCOs in Orkney earlier this week, and from the meeting that MSPs had immediately prior to this debate, I see no sign that Highl is close to meeting that challenge. Yet the consequences for delivery of our Lifeline Air services if staff start voting with their feet is truly alarming. There is little confidence either in Highl's costs for this budget. Highl are quick to point out other parts of the world where this is being delivered or considered, but all have significantly better infrastructure in place than in the Highlands and Islands, and none present the same difficulties. Unfortunately, by the time reality catches up with the assertions being made by Highl and latterly by ministers, millions will have been wasted and staff will have left. Deputy Presiding Officer, this government's record on centralisation and major IT projects is not unblemished. Just ask our police or our farmers. Yet Highl are now proposing an unhappy amalgam of both. Funny how such processes never lead to services being devolved outwards, always concentrated in the centre. If the infrastructure and the system are so resilient, why not locate the tower in Kirkwall or Sunborough? In renewables, in oil and gas, for example, both communities have shown they can be the centres of excellence and attract and retain workers. But, Deputy Presiding Officer, that was never on the cards. That's what happens with centralisation and when the deck is stacked from the start. I thank again Beatrice Wishart for allowing Parliament to have this important debate, and I urge the Cabinet Secretary once again to call a halt to these potentially damaging proposals.
I now call Michael Matheson to respond to the debate for around 7 minutes, please, Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And can I, like others, congratulate Beatrice Wishart in securing time for this particular debate. And I've listened with interest to colleagues across the Chamber in the contributions which have made on what is an important issue around the future shape of air traffic control services in Highlands and Islands airports in the years ahead. Members will recognise, of course, that the provision of air traffic control services is changing across the world. There's an unprecedented demand for controllers and a move from traditional practices to more modern working, including digital working. These new work practices, views on safety and levels of service, as well as new regulatory frameworks, are creating a different air traffic control environment that all airports must adapt to if they are to continue to operate in the future. So, Presiding Officer, I want to first of all deal with the issue of the regulatory environment in which Highl operates, because this provides important context to this issue. As the regulatory environment in which Highl will be operating in the years ahead is a changing one, and therefore the way in which ATC services must perform will have to evolve, reflecting that regulatory change. ATC modernisation is driven by change which is made by the European Aviation Safety Agency and the Civil Aviation Authority concerning new regulations governing the use of controlled airspace. Now, since the work started in 2017, there has been broad agreement, and I believe there's agreement in the Chamber here today, that doing nothing is not an option, as it would lead to the eventual cessation of air services in the Highlands and Islands. The current practice operated by Highl will not meet future operational or regulatory requirements. The current infrastructure is not suited to modern working, and the current arrangements have weaknesses that ensure that there are challenges around reliability and sustainability of services going forward. And while the current arrangements are safe, there are... Can I just finish this point? I will give way to Mr Finney. And while the current arrangements are safe, there is an opportunity to make them safer and an opportunity at the same time to get greater efficiency through reducing emissions in the way in which aircraft operate. I'll give way to Mr Finney.
John Finney.
Thank you, President Officer. I'm grateful to the Cabinet Secretary giving me. The Cabinet Secretary acknowledged the quote I read out from Prospect the Union. No one has issues about safety, but the model that's being proposed, which presumably the Cabinet Secretary will acknowledge isn't the only model that's available, it doesn't come without risks as well.
Michael Matheson.
So, not all the models come with risks, and I will address this issue later on in my contribution because Mr Finney raises an important point. But, Presiding Officer, I do believe that we all recognise that safe and sustainable air services are absolutely essential to the economy and the social well-being of our Highlands and Islands. And they are a major part of supporting these communities. And therefore, Highl must ensure that the company in each of its airports operates in compliance with all of the regulatory requirements for the benefits of passengers and the wider community which they serve. Now, recognising the vital role that these airports play and the fact that the status quo is not an option, Highl commissioned Helios to carry out a full and detailed analysis of all of the options available to them, both collectively and in relation to each of the airports in the group, and a number of members have made reference to this particular report. I'm happy to give way, Presiding Officer, but there's a lot I need to get through, if you can bear with me time-wise in order to do so. Happy to give way to Mr Allen.
Alistair Allen.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for giving way. He may be about to develop this point, but can I ask what consideration was given by Highl, serious consideration, to looking at sites other than Inverness for their proposed new model?
Michael Matheson.
Presiding Officer, I will come to that point in my contribution as well that's been raised by the member. It's worth keeping in mind that Helios are a specialist independent consultancy which work with airports around the world on these types of issues. Their work was detailed and dispassionate and recognised the unique environment in which Highl operate. It benefited from engagement and contributions from Highl air traffic control staff and other interests, and also comprised of a full review of all air traffic management operations and options to address regulatory requirements, identifying the challenges and the potential weaknesses that Liam MacArthur and others have made reference to. The remote towers and centralised surveillance option, in conjunction with controlled airspace, was recommended by Helios as the most appropriate for Highl and best suited to Highl's multi-airport structure and particular needs. And since that report was completed, further detailed examination of the options for each airport has identified that Aerodrome Flight Information Service may be more proportionate for Benbecular and Wick Airport, referenced by Gail Ross and also by Rhoda Grant. This reflects the volume and the nature of flights at these airports and the use of the airspace around them. And these proposals would mean that the airports would operate in a similar way to Barra, to Tyree, Campbelltown and Isla. Now, Presiding Officer, members will be aware that the implementation of this change is currently subject to discussion with staff, but also with a range of other parties who have an interest in the matter, particularly the main operator, Logan Air, and it also requires the licensing and approval of the Civil Aviation Authority as the airport regulator. Since the decision was taken back in 2018 to implement this programme of work, significant progress has been made in a number of areas. And I know that some will say that there should have been greater engagement by Highl at an earlier stage, but I also recognise that engagement has taken place over the course of the last 2 years with elected members, interested parties, and also with airline operators and the Civil Aviation Authority. I know Logan Air, the biggest operator in the Highlands and Islands, has written to members outlining their views on this issue. And as an airline with more experience than any other operating flights in the Highlands and Islands, their view on safety and resilience, of course, does carry significant weight. I'll give way to Liam MacArthur.
Liam MacArthur.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for taking an intervention? Can I also thank the Cabinet Secretary for sparing time to discuss this issue in a bit more detail following on the topical questions on Tuesday? He'll recognise the concerns I have around the technicalities of this issue, but frankly the consultation with staff over the last 2 years has been Highl in sales mode, in transmit mode, not in listening mode. And part of the problem is that 2 years down the line there's not an awful lot of confidence within staff that Highl are prepared to listen to the serious concerns they continue to raise, to the point where staff are preparing to leave, which puts at jeopardy not just the organisation but the delivery of lifeline services to Orkney and around the Highlands and Islands network.
Michael
Well,
Matheson.
Presiding Officer, the Board of Highl have taken forward the recommendation that was set out in the Helios report, which looked at this matter in great detail. What's important now is that in taking forward this particular model, that they engage with staff and interested stakeholders in trying to address their particular concerns. And I know, for example, my colleague Paul Wheelhouse, he met with Beatrice Wishart and Rhoda Grant before Christmas to cover some of the issues on this particular matter, and he suggested to them providing a list of the areas of concern and issues that they may have. And this week we received a response from Rhoda Grant on this matter. We haven't received details from Beatrice Wishart as yet. However, that offer remains open in order to make sure that these issues are picked up on and addressed. I'm very clear about the need for Highl to make sure that they continue to engage with staff throughout the programme of work in taking this project forwards. Presiding Officer, I want to turn to the issue of safety, because a number of members have made reference to issues around safety and have suggested to, or implied to some extent, that digital tools is in some way less safe than the current arrangements. We need to be very clear, Presiding Officer. Highl will only introduce arrangements which enhance safety. A new technology, it will improve visibility for controls. It will ensure that the controller is able to see an aircraft at all times, something that is not always the case at present. And although the current arrangements are safe, we should always strive to improve safety even further, and this is an important part of the new arrangements. I'm sure that all members would have confidence in the Civil Aviation Authority, given that they will require to licence and approve any new scheme that has been introduced by Highl on these matters. The Civil Aviation Authority are the safety experts on these matters and are also driving the regulatory change that mean we need to change the existing operational structures for air traffic control, and that the Civil Aviation Authority are best placed to make this assessment. I want to turn, though, also to the point that members have raised regarding the Islands Act. And as I highlighted in my response to Liam MacArthur's question on Tuesday, an Islands Impact Assessment will be undertaken by Highl on this issue. The reason it was not undertaken in 2018 is because it predates the Islands Act. This is a piece of work that has been ongoing for some 2 years now. However, it will be undertaken as part of our commitment within the Islands Act. I have given way once. I really have to try and make progress on this issue, with all due respect, Mr Finney. In relation to controllers and ATC support staff, it remains an important element for Highl to undertake proper and full detailed engagement with staff in order to try and address individual circumstances and concerns which they may have. I fully recognise, Presiding Officer, that major transformational change that is in some cases will involve staff having to be trained in new procedures, relocate to a new workplace, or potentially commute to Inverness for parts of the week. I recognise the challenges and the concerns that this raises for staff, and that's why it's important that Highl engage directly and individually with staff affected by the particular changes that will be introduced as a result of this change. A couple of members have raised the issue about, as Alistair Allen did, and also it was referenced by Liam MacArthur in his comments, about why Inverness was chosen. And the reason that Inverness was chosen, or one of the reasons Inverness was chosen, is it was the location of a digital tower was a result of a staff survey which identified it as its preferred location for a central surveillance tower if one was to be established. And Highl published the survey details of this, and they will have given a commitment. They will continue to be open about key operational decisions as they make further progress. Presiding Officer, I do recognise that not all air traffic controllers are supportive of the change, and that is understandable. But this does present an opportunity to move in a direction, as the rest of the industry is, around the provision of air traffic control services, to ensure that Highl can meet the regulatory changes which it will face in the years ahead, to deliver a more resilient service than they are at the present time, while future-proofing this service with the latest technology to benefit service users in the years ahead. Ultimately, though, Presiding Officer, the programme will provide an opportunity to provide a much more resilient and safer service than we have at the present time. But of course, full implementation by Highl will be taken forward in a fashion which I believe will be developed in a careful, detailed assessment way with rigorous testing implemented throughout that process in order to achieve the civil aviation standards. And I would want to encourage members from across the Chamber to continue to raise concerns and matters that they believe that need to be addressed as this programme is moving forward, in order to allow Highl and other stakeholders to ensure that these matters have been appropriately addressed going forward. Thank you.
I think we may have set a record for the longest response at a members' debate. That concludes this debate, and this meeting is adjourned until 2 o'clock.